Welcome, as
Yeah,
always, to
yeah. I've never read Discworld. We are on Spotify. If you're listening on Spotify, you can watch us as well. And similarly on YouTube, where in the last week I've just noticed about 4 or 5 months worth of like lovely comments. So I mean to get into those and do a bit of engagement. Some really
yeah,
stuff.
that's been nice. So the voice you just heard was, of course, Andy Luke. This is PJ Hart. I am the Discworld veteran. Andy is the Discworld newbie. However, this month is one of those occasional, rare events. I think event is probably overstating it, where we read a Discworld book that neither of us had read before. So this one was one of those few black holes that I had that I was keen to fill in by doing this podcast. And Andy's going to tell us a little bit about the book.
Yep. This episode we are looking at Maurice and the amazing Maurice and his educated rodents, which was the 2001 winner of the Carnegie Medal for the respected literary award. It also came out, I think, November 2001, 1 month after our last book, which was The Last Hero. That's something in and of itself. That's an achievement.
Absolutely.
Published by Doubleday in the UK, HarperCollins in the US. And I'll get into the back blurb, shall I?
Please do.
So it's a story of Discworld. Morris, a streetwise tomcat, has a perfect money-making scam. Everyone knows his stories about rats and pipers, and Morris has a stupid-looking kid with a pipe and his very own plague of rats. Strangely, educated rats. But in bad blinks, the little calm suddenly goes down the drain, for someone there is playing a different tune. And now the rats must learn a new word: evil. It's not a game anymore, it's a real rat cat rat world, and that might only be the start. So quotes, ethically challenging, beautifully orchestrated, philosophically opposed to the usual plot fixes of fantasy from The Guardian and from The Times, simply gripping storytelling. I'd be hard pressed to disagree with those summaries.
Absolutely. And I mean, even the tone of the back blurb is a little bit darker. It's a little bit heavier, perhaps, than we've been used to, which is perhaps surprising. You mentioned the Carnegie Medal there, sort of in passing, but it's worth pointing out that that's not only a very prestigious literary award, it's specifically a literary award for children's writing. And this is arguably the first official foray, I believe, into like young adult or children's writing within the Discworld series, I believe. So that feels kind of notable in and of itself. It feels like Terry's really kind of experimenting with a few things in this period. We just had a picture book with The Last Hero. Now we've got a children's book that's all about talking animals. Most of our other books have primarily had human protagonists, despite the wide range of species in Discworld. So this really feels like new ground.
So what we like to do is break down the book into 4 or 5 synopses and go through and probably begin with like an overview. So you pick it up on the children's thing. I mean, that was one of two conceptions I had going in. The first that it was actually retconned later to be a Discworld book, which I don't think is true. I think is a rumor I picked up on. It wasn't true, but the children's book thing. And you know what? I found this book a bit of a hard read, probably a harder read than any other Discworld book. It didn't feel like what I imagined children's literature to be, and putting it in that category, or examining it in that category, it feels very transgressive.
Mm. Yeah,
It
for sure.
challenges so many of the sort of the tropes of children's literature, quite on a meta way, obviously through the Mr. Bunsey stuff, but the sort of the hard kind of violence of the life of rodents and by extension animals, from us dumb, savage, cruel bipeds. Um,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of your first impressions, I think those are big ones. They feel quite different, as you mentioned, from usually when we're talking about these books at the top of the podcast, we're talking first impressions. We're usually effusing at this stage about, how nice it is to revisit certain characters or certain locales. We're talking about, new funny takes on certain modern day things. This feels like quite a departure from all of that. Not necessarily in a bad way. In fact, I would argue definitely in a good way. But I think it's interesting that you said you found it a challenging read. I think we should have kept a spreadsheet of how long it takes us to read these books, because I personally have found there's some really interesting swings. Sometimes it takes me a while, it takes me a few weeks. Sometimes I can be done in a few days, maybe a week. But I think this is the first time where I've beaten you comprehensively in a read by a number of weeks. I think I finished this maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Um, I found it almost the opposite. Like I hadn't read it before, and I guess maybe just because there's so little Discworld left for me to read, and I'm quite hungry for it as a result. Once I knew that I was gonna kind of dig this book, once I knew that I was into it, I just devoured it, because it was familiar enough. It's still very Terry Pratchett, but really interesting to me and really different for all the reasons that you've mentioned.
and on paper, literally, it's 270 pages in my version,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought, right, okay, we're going for another Last Hero type breeze through, but no, no, it's broken into chapters as well, and it's very different in tone in that it lacks the usual Discworld colorful humor. Then until maybe the last section, which kind of I think relatively fluidly returns to that. I've got a vested interest as regulars might know. I do have in the floor below where I sit now, I have 12 gerbils. In the last 2 years, over 30 gerbils have passed through this home.
Amazing.
Um, and we've even had some interesting pod relevant adoptions. We've got a young'un of about 4 months, maybe, called Vines. And during the
Respect.
course of this book, a newborn is called Darktan.
Ah, yes, we'll find out more about Darktan. I'm sure everybody listening along will already be very familiar with that character.
So I read Terry did, I don't know the details, but Terry did a bit of research on rodents. I think maybe in his afterword he mentions that, but I'm not sure the details or the sources. But that's very interesting. Being a gerbil owner, I couldn't do the thing of imagining the characters in this book, the rats as humans.
Mm,
I was literally treating them as rats. So like getting them confused and sort of monitoring the speed at which they're running and like all the way that I see my own gerbils were things that I put into that. There's a lot of whittling goes on in their book.
yeah, for sure.
Gerbils and other rodents completely map their surroundings. Smell is their primary kind of sense.
Of
Uh,
course.
the whole morality debate around rats killing and eating other rats is something that has come up with gerbils. They generally don't eat other gerbils. A mother doesn't generally eat her young unless that youngster is like very sick or has passed away. The corpse in the cage would attract predators and to remove that. I did lose a beloved gerbil about 6 weeks ago, or maybe less.
Oh, yeah,
From
that's right.
from
Yeah.
other ones, it's the first time it happened. So they're very territorial creatures, but not usually to that extent.
Yeah, this would
Quite
be
sad. You
yeah,
mentioned to me this was going to be a dark book, and I feared it would be a lot darker than it was.
yeah, and
Um,
to be honest, I can't remember exactly how I found that out, but that was definitely the impression that I had somewhere in the back of my mind going into it, that this was going to be kind of dark. I guess maybe just from like Reddit and other discussions. And I guess, yeah, being a rodent owner and having experienced losses recently in that regard, this I can see maybe why this was a harder read for you than it was for me in that context, because I hadn't really thought about it until you said it there. Like I don't really anthropomorphize the rats in this book. Like I'm thinking about them as rats. They're on 4 feet. Most when I'm thinking about them, when I'm picturing them, even though like some of them are wearing clothes and they're doing very intricate things, I'm still picturing them very much as rats first rather than as tiny humans who happen to be shaped like rats, which I think is a lot of, how kind of talking animals are portrayed in media a lot of the time. And like you mentioned, there's this kind of Enid Blyton. Is that right? Peter Rabbit. Is that Enid Blyton? That's not Enid Blyton.
Beatrix Potter,
Beatrix
I think.
Potter. Yeah, it's Beatrix
Terry was
Potter.
going for.
I'll edit around that to make it seem like I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, but there's the Peter Rabbit parody running the whole way through it, but it's obviously clear that Terry kind of wants to do something different than the usual kind of treating talking animals like tiny humans bit that is popular in children's literature. Uh, yeah, so with the table kind of set on all that, hopefully you're reading along with us because this one feels different. I'm keen to get into it. Would you like to kick off the first synopsis?
Part 1. We are the changelings. We are not like other rats. Adventures with Mr. Highwayman, a magical lunch, and one last job in Bad Blintz. There be rat catchers and rationed food, and an offer of $7 for Maurice, or 4 loaves of bread. Melissa suspects a wizard threatened to turn him into a gerbil. The changelings note an odd scarcity of rats. Dangerous Beans thinks about not killing other rats, writing things down, and cooperation.
Well written as always. If I recall correctly, there was a promise made after probably a little bit too much free wine at the Belfast Media Festival that I would write these synopses, and obviously I haven't done that because I always make that promise and I never
Yeah, too
do.
much beer on my part. I forgot about that.
Oh, I shouldn't have brought it up. Maybe I'll edit that out as well. But at this point, there's no going back. I think the pressures, the stakes are far too high for me to start writing these synopses now. I think maybe I did one. Did I do Hogfather? I did one. Maybe I didn't like them. Anyway, that was great as always. And what's really interesting to me about this first section, especially in the context of it being a children's book, is that it really just starts kind of in media res. There's not a gentle kind of on ramp into like, oh, by the way, here's a gang, there's a talking cat, there's a kid, there's some rats. It's just like all these characters are already going about this. They're on their way from point A to point B. Not a very traditional children's story style way to introduce a bunch of characters, and it's kind of all for the better, I think.
Yeah, yeah, evidenced by nobody knows Keith's name for the first quarter of the book. Um,
Stupid
and
looking kid, and I know a few Keiths, and I work with a couple of Keiths semi often, and I know at least one of them is kind of uptight about the name Keith being used as this kind of like this recurring butt of jokes across several media, that it's just kind of like it's a funny name to use as a punchline. So it did make me smile when his name was eventually revealed.
it does a really great job of setting the table as regards to our characters. There's a lot of them introduced, and I think some of them don't. I think Peaches kind of gets lost in later parts of the book to some extent. Dangerous Beans sort of goes away for a bit and comes back. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, they all feel quite different.
yeah, that's maybe that's a pretty big challenge actually that Terry set himself here to to introduce these characters along with the story, rather than do what would be the traditional thing of, start the story in the junkyard or wherever, they were behind the university where they all get their magical abilities. We're just, we're months, if not years past that. And in a way, he's a bit of a victim of his own success here. Like you said, some of the rats, like Peaches, maybe for example, gets lost in the shuffle a bit. I think that's because he's put a lot of effort into these names, and some of them are just more memorable than others. Like I love Dangerous Beans. It's probably my favorite character name in all of Discworld.
Yeah. Yeah, Dangerous Beans was top of the list for unnamed gerbils. Maybe the next one. I'll tell you, I've also been using Kiki's a lot recently.
Oh,
I've
are you are you
never
are you
had
allowed? I don't know.
before.
That feels kind of racially motivated. I don't know if you're allowed to say that. You're not a gerbil.
Um, yeah, no. Oh, I did run Kiki meaning through. There's an AI thing which I want to avoid, but also means to laugh mostly at somebody, to giggle with a friend or to yourself.
To laugh
Can't
mostly
wonder
at
about
it. Yeah.
something funny.
But there's something quite automatic about it, just in terms of like that's just the noise that rats make. So it sort of feels like that's the rhubarb, rhubarb, rhubarb of the rat world is, rats go kiki. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I mean, I don't think anybody overthinks things quite as much as Terry Pratchett.
There's PJ will know about oh God, Assisi, yes, which is an animal sanctuary not too far away.
Oh yes, of course.
They had a really bad case where somebody was mistreating rats, and
Mm,
they eventually they got out to rescue them, and there were about 70 or 80 rats
oof.
that they had to take in one go. And there's probably still a few there, but when I was donating a few gerbils, I got to see some of the rats. It's just beautiful, really massive creatures, like shaped like pears or like two pears set together.
Yeah. Rats are cool animals.
Yeah,
They're fascinating.
so cool. And I think some people have a creepy feeling towards it. And of course, rat has all sorts of negative connotations. But I feel very much like gerbils. I mean, when you think of rats or any rodent as fast moving, it's very different from the domesticated animal that you can sit and covertly watch when it's still, when you're holding it in your arms, and all levels of 100 cuteness.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. But what about the book? What's up?
Okay,
What?
back to the book. Yeah.
Rodents are great. Luckily, this is a book about rodents, so that helps.
So I don't know if we're quite at the point yet, but let's bring it up. The origin of educated animals being magic from being the unseen university's badly distributed waste. I wanted to quiz you, PJ, on
Oh dear.
who amongst the faculty's responsibility should that have been?
I mean, it feels like the sort of thing that inevitably at some point would have been delegated to Ponder Stibbons, and he would have refused to do it on the grounds that he's much too intelligent. Although, actually, if we want to go deep, it's not that deep, I guess, but if I recall correctly, in at least one or two wizard books, there is a dwarf groundskeeper whose name I can't immediately recall.
Yeah, we've seen him a few times before. He was in Reaper Man, I believe.
Yeah. But again, maybe he's too busy making things beautiful, tending flower beds and such like. So I could see this being a bit of an administrative hot potato in the old Unseen University. But if there's one thing we know for sure about Unseen University is that nobody really wants to take responsibility for anything. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good question though. I sort of do wonder though, if you're reading this as a young reader, if this is a kid's book, you're reading it, like how much of that stuff do you really care about? I think it's a really good idea to just start this book in media res and just go, there's talking animals. This is a magic world. There's talking animals. I think the explanation about that is kind of thrown in for us, for the adult readers, for the people who have been following the series at this point for, nearly 30 books
It's
or
a really
whatever.
nice contrast that you get this Beatrix Potter stuff on one hand, and the fact that Maurice and Co are running a con.
Yeah, it's great. I love
They're on
that.
the big
Yeah, yeah.
scam.
And I can sort of see that's the sort of thing that I think would really set Terry Pratchett's imagination alight. That feels like the kind of kernel of this idea that like how come all the animals protagonists in these kids' books are all just like stand up guys, they're all like really nice and moral and cute. Like why can't they be con artists? Because like they're animals, they're just trying to survive. That's the law of the jungle.
I feel there's a lot of writerly investment given to the fact that, to the notion that these rats and this cat can talk and can think. There's like a neurocultural thing going on.
Mm.
See this in this part of generally framed quite well around Dangerous Beans and his sort of philosophical conundrums and debates.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit early in the book for me to get into this because usually this is something I mentioned later on when it occurs, and there's plenty of instances of it here. But like that existential horror that Terry Pratchett dips his toe into occasionally is very present here, and that's almost like the first iteration of it. It's just like one day you're a rat, and the next day you're a person. That's terrifying. Like that, there's horror and dread in that, and Dangerous Beans really walks that tightrope, and like you say, leans into the philosophy of it, and you can see how something like a Peter Rabbit becomes like a holy text in that instance. I find that whole parody is tremendous, the way that he links all that together. So yeah, so even though it does kind of hit the ground running, where they're in the coach on the way to their last big score, it still sets the table really well, as you say. Like we get a really clear thematic grounding in what this story is going to be about. And
And
yeah,
you can feel that sense of dread in Bad Blintz itself when they're investigating the rationed food lines, when there's no other rats around, the rat catchers, when they first meet the kids and Morris. And it's quite unsettling.
I would go as far as to say it is straight up Lovecraftian. Not an adjective I drop lightly, but like yeah, the whole like the gang arriving in Bad Blintz, and like you say, everything is just off. It's just like it's a Lovecraft kind of character arriving in town, and everybody's in a fish cult kind of vibe. So yeah, like this for his first official Discworld kids book, like it's kind of a straight up horror vibes at times. And again, I think more kids writers certainly these days could do with leaning into that. Like kids love that shit. Goosebumps and all that stuff.
We had a wee chat last week with Melissa, and I had some problems with her. I've kind of let go since I finished the last 50 pages. I think she serves as a really good ambassador to Bad Blintz, and the whole contrast between the fictional talking animals world and the magical talking animals world that she's pulled into.
Yeah, I think it's a perhaps a parody too far in that there's so much going on in that sense thematically with the animal characters that to have this sort of deconstruction of fairy tale tropes running alongside it. Her aunties are meant to be the sisters Grimm, and she has this ability to kind of make a story, a fairy tale out of anything. That feels like a bit of a vestigial limb in a way, where like he maybe thought that was going to be necessary to kind of to set a framework for this world when it isn't. We don't need that fairy tale thing. We already have quite a clear thematic grounding in the whole sort of Peter Rabbit talking animals parody. We don't need it to be a Brothers Grimm parody as well.
It does
Although,
feel like a bit of a Terry trope at this point. Although I still enjoyed the juice of it. I was actually one of our commentators left a really good comment on Witches Abroad and breaking it down for a sequence that I thought was very fairy tale grounded, but they
mm,
had shown it in round world geographical terms. So I think he's trying to have his cake and eat it, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I don't mind her as a character, and I can see that he's kind of noodling with something that isn't going to pay dividends down the road, and I don't want to spoil anything for you at the minute. But with a character in this kind of slightly more youth facing story, a character of that age who has a certain amount of her own agency, just leave it at that.
I think
But
I know who you're referring to, but we'll not spoil our first time viewers.
indeed, and I do sort of get if you're doing the Pied Piper, how you can't do it because ultimately that's what we're clearly building up to here is a Pied Piper parody. Try saying that 5 times fast. But ultimately, I think it's such a well known story. The fact that it is such an ingrained fairy tale is that we don't question it. We don't need somebody from that world, somebody from the fairy tale authorship world to kind of to guide us through that. It's ingrained in us. We're much more interested, I think, in what it's like to be a rat in that world, and we want to spend time with those characters rather than have a human character kind of narrate the themes of those to us or to kind of undermine them or parody them. I don't necessarily think we need that.
Counterpoint to that, then, I think Melissa is posed very well as a character caught up in these notions of fairy tales as reality, and the journey that she goes on in this book does pull her out of that and teaches her what reality actually is. And it's this world of theft and poisons and chases,
Mm.
a bit of barbarity and political corruption and all kinds of grown up stuff that's not really fair.
Yes, that's a good point. And I will say one final thing actually in her defense, just from like a story mechanics point of view, in that especially from the midpoint onwards, so we'll probably get there. Well, I mean, hopefully we'll get there. That's why we're here. Uh, but Keith needs somebody to talk to, just for the human elements of the story to kind of be communicated to the audience. Like, so he needs a buddy, and like, I mean, she's still batting over a point five in terms of an interesting character. So I'm like, if he has to have somebody, it might as well be her. And they do have some fun moments later on. So like, absolutely, she can't come out of nowhere. So like, you got to set her up here when you're setting up the town, and she does help smooth that over too. But just as a big idea, this sort of like conceptual person who lives inside a fairy tale. I don't know if we needed to make quite as much of that, but I mean, as always, we're only ever nitpicking here. We're not finding big serious story or character issues in any of these books.
Do you want to go give us our second front paw synopsis?
By all means, they're not our rats; they're their rats. Revelations about the rat catcher's old leather bootlaces. Darktan nests Nourishing's ability with traps. Fresh's death leads to considering the afterlife. Ham and Pork senses a challenge to his leadership. A secret passage in the rat house conceals hoarded food. Something in the tunnels makes educated rodents forget how to talk. Ham and Pork finds a trapped, fearful colony. Militia confronts the rat catchers who are under an outside influence. And Maurice fears a strange voice in his head.
Go back to Melissa again. Her idea of stories and things all working out a certain way. They kind of act for cover of the sort of. There are some plot contrivances in this, and I think the rat captures is one. But there's a sort of there's some kind of skin around the character of Melissa that eases that. I'm not sure if I know what. If you know,
No, yeah, yes, I get you because she is kind of one of her roles, I guess, within this plot is to foreground those tropes. Is to go to hang a lantern on it. We would say, I guess, in comedy writing sometimes, it's like, yes, these are tropes, these are story tropes. You, as a canny audience member, are aware of that. But if I tell you, as the writer, that I'm also aware of it, then it's okay. We're on the same page. We're both laughing together. You're not laughing at me. I'm not laughing at you. And I think, yeah, I guess part of her role in this section is to kind of smooth all that stuff over, because I would agree, certainly on that point about the rat catchers. But you need those kind of scenery chewing villains especially in the opening, especially if you have if there's a greater villain yet to be revealed, and part of your story relies on keeping them concealed. You need to have a red herring villain or a mini boss in the interim. So making them, you know, nasty rat catchers is perfect, especially in the context of this book. The fake bootlaces and all that stuff. I feel like this must be from a version of the fairy tale, like a round world version of the fairy tale that I'm just not familiar with. We should have done that. We should have gone back and studied up on the old Pied Piper fairy tale probably before we recorded this podcast. It's not the sort of thing I generally read to my kids, if I'm being honest. They're not super into stuff.
The Pied Piper story is actually quite key, particularly in the last part, and is doesn't come out of nowhere either. It's there from the start, but wasn't actually something I thought an awful lot about.
No, I think this story very quickly outgrows the straight parody of the Pied Piper. You know, it's a great deal more than that, but it still serves as quite an interesting foundation, I suppose.
Do we need the fake tales?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. Is that a specific reference potentially to a version of the Pied Piper? Maybe I don't know.
The Elspeth wiki is quite short on detail in the annotations, although there is the sort of fandom wiki has a lot more, which I haven't been able to read through. But I'm wondering if the rat catchers have all these rats sealed up in one place, they need two fake rat tails.
Yeah, why aren't they just going into that big cage and cutting off real rat tails? It's a good question. And I think there is maybe mention in passing. You know, one of them does rebuke the other, I think, for doing it, just for being lazy or for getting greedy or whatever. But yeah, that again, I think that's another reason maybe to suggest that it is a specific reference to something. I don't know. Weird connection actually about the Keiths. One of the real life Keiths that I mentioned played the lead role in Martin McDonagh's play The Pillowman when it was last played in the Lyric Theatre here in Belfast. And a big part of that play, which I'm not going to spoil for anybody, is also kind of concerns itself with the story of the Pied Piper and how dark it is, especially how dark it is for children if you really read it and get into it. And I was trying to recall if there was any mention of fake rat tails or anything in that, but I don't think there is. It's a great play, and it's another great example of, you know, building on old fairy tales and giving them kind of darker, more thematically rich meanings and contexts and stuff.
I talked about the educated neuroculture, I call it, and there's a lot of politics in this section. I mean, just looking at our synopsis, we've got Darktan's test of nourishing and how well she can use traps. Is she going to sort of let Darktan down at the point where he needs her the most? And the interplay between Houndport, the sort of the elderly sort of clan leader, and I mean every clan or colony of rodents has a leader, and there are clear territorial lines. It's actually one of my favorite. I have quite a lot of favorite moments in this book, but the way Darktan deals with ham and pork, and there's a diplomatic essence coming across. Very very astute politician.
Oh yeah, very very much so, and
actually wonderful setup for the end.
Tremendous setup, yeah. And Terry's quite comfortable, I think, writing these characters who are slightly out of time. You know, these characters whose time have passed. You know, we just had Cohen's entire book about that, essentially. Obviously, something that's kind of on his mind at the minute is kind of the sort of seismic changes, I guess, that he is seeing in society happening, perhaps, you know, at the end of the 20th century, start of the 21st century. You know, somebody of his generation, I think, would be quite attuned to that. And I mean, nobody is more attuned, I think, to how people think and how society works than Terry Pratchett. So yeah, I'm not surprised to see a character like Hammond Pork in this, and I think he's a really good reflection on the other younger rats.
I agree. What I'm trying to figure out here, show my greenness, is how ham and pork works. I mean, there's a lot of ham and pork on paper. It should be a very sort of not such a great um, character. He's old. His ideas are decadent. So why do I feel so much empathy and love, I guess, towards ham and pork?
Yeah, right. I think a lot of that comes down to like the respect that the other rats show him. You know, that even though they are moving with the times, like they still respect what it means to be a rat, and ham and pork embodies that. Sort of speaks to like that lizard hindbrain, I guess, that we have as humans as well. We're like, we're always going to respect the kind of, or we always should probably respect our elders first and foremost. But like, rat society has other kind of conditions where like the biggest rat, the rat that can fight the best, the rat that can probably sire the most offspring or whatever, like that's the genetic leader in that society. So what happens when that society becomes sentient, when they become people?
There's one moment I can point to, ham and pork, where they find the trapped rats,
Oh yeah,
and the notion is put forward to keep them where they are, and ham and pork just loses it.
yeah,
He's effing raging,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's like, yeah, I can totally empathize with him.
Yeah, and I'd always kind of put that out there as like a storytelling thing. Like you can give a character like a lot of flaws, like a lot of flaws. But if they're on the side of freedom, if they're on the side of what's right, they get away with you get away with a lot. You can be a very complex character and can keep an audience on board with them if when the chips are down, like you say, when they're confronted with a cage full of prisoners with no empty space in it, that they only have one solution to that. You know, there's some moral clarity there. You know, if you have that one point of moral clarity with a character, I think that goes a really, really long way. So that opens it up. That means you can have loads of fun with ham and pork, you know, and he wants to eat other rats and he doesn't want to make decisions. He doesn't want to think more than three sentences in a row. But like when the chips are down, he knows what's right. I think that goes a long way.
There's a whole notion of like psychologies here, and how much do these rats change from they're rats who they are in their early months conditioning and imprinting, but as newly sort of born, if you will, magical creatures, um, and sort of re-question that those earlier held aspects of character. I mean, Darktan is a primary example of sardines.
Sardine, yeah, I can't believe we haven't mentioned sardines yet. Just that, and that idea that
And there's trope commentary there.
oh, big time, yeah, like the idea that you have the comedy anthropomorphic animal with a hat who loves dancing, who loves showmanship, but like if you just look a little bit deeper, like what's the next layer of that character? Like why does that character behave that way?
Yeah, Sardines is performative, alpha performative. This does find its flourish in the finale. There's a perfect thematic segue.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it pays off as well. It's got story implications for sure. I think the last thing maybe I just want to say about ham and pork actually is that I think this is a theme that's definitely cropped up before in Discworld where like the younger that you are, the younger you are when the world changes, the more readily you'll accept it. And I think that's so obvious. It almost doesn't need to be said, right? Like we would all agree with that.
Yeah.
But what I love about Terry Pratchett's writing is that he quite often focuses on the character who's older, who finds it harder to accept those changes. Like you can see that in Vimes, you can see that in Death, you can see it's here very clearly here in Ham and Pork, and it's obviously something that he, I think, personally kind of identifies with. And, reading Rob's biography and stuff like that, and he never wanted to be left behind. He was always so curious. He was so keen to make sure that he was across all the new technology and stuff like that. He's an early internet adopter and everything. And There's something about that lust for life and for knowledge and for experiences, is just endlessly endearing about his writing and his life.
That respect you were talking about is beautifully embodied by Darktown.
Hmm.
Well, as I say aloud, name a gerbil is short for D'Artagnan.
Oh yeah,
The League Musketeer or Muskehound, if you prefer. Um,
it's a good reference. Yeah, it's a thematically appropriate reference too.
and yeah, just really sort of doesn't really want to be leader, I think. Perfectly up for putting forward the good ideas and seeing that they're implemented. I think one of these sort of anti-leader leaders,
Yeah,
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 respects the boundaries.
yeah. Terry's big on those as well, as we know. I think that he's a big adherent to that kind of notion that the people who want to be leaders make bad leaders, and Darktan fits into that Vimes category of kind of reluctant leaders. But the fact that he's there with Hammonpork, who has that pre magic version, or the kind of, I hesitate to say dumb version. It's not what I mean, but like the kind of instinctual version of what readership means for rats. I love that we're just like full scale talking just like thematics and world here. Like the story of this it's not like particularly complicated, but it's not like super simple either. Like there's a bit of a bait and switch with the rat catchers who we meet in this section. They are bad people, they're bad guys, but they're not the bad guy. We start to get hints of who the real malevolent force behind this story is in this section. So like I think it's quite telling that we're both, I think, quite endlessly fascinated by the themes of this book, but that's by no means to say that there isn't a well constructed plot going on underneath all this. And I'm sure all of you listening have read along with us, and maybe you're keen for us to discuss it, or maybe you're happy for us to continue discussing the thematics at length. But let's see what happens when we get to the next section.
So yeah, onto the back pause. Now this is the longest synopsis I've ever had to write in any Discworld book. So let's strap in. We're going into deep plot territory, part 3. Trying to give a cat orders. It was easier to nail jelly to a wall. Muddy Morris escapes a mind reader and confesses to his secret origin. Peaches reads from Mr. Bungee's adventures. In the dog pit, Havenport calls for revolution, and sardines and Darktan affect a daring and unforgettable rescue. The rat catchers are ready to skip town, but their deception is laid bare upon the suggestion of poison. Darktan faces death and comes back a different Darktan. Havenport's burial place is marked. Spider is revealed, hypnotizing humans, taunting Maurice, and seemingly tempting dangerous beings. Meanwhile, the new leader rescues Keith and Melissa from a stampede of frightened Kikis.
Even just with all that plot going on, and then just name dropping Keith just makes me laugh.
Talking about Spider,
I suppose we should. Yeah.
I have problems with the Rat King. So
Okay.
pretty much as Terry explains in the book, a Rat King is a creature with like a number of tails tied together, rat. And there have been various rumors across the centuries that this is something that rats have done to themselves by accident. Um, and primarily the story is that humans have done this to rats, so more likely the guild of the rat catchers. Where Spider is a problem for me is that this sort of telepathic, maybe telekinetic magic seems to just come from this notion of being sort of tied together, sort of the many minds kind of thing, rather than some kind of unseen university type explanation. I think that's a bit of a plot hole, really. I don't have much more to say on it than that.
No, it's fair. I think, yeah, because there's a slight contradiction presented to us as readers here, which is that we know the rats that we know and spend time with, and whose point of view we see the story from. We know how they became intelligent. That's explained to us. They rolled around in some magic goo, and now they're smart. And then Maurice, as we also found out in this section, Maurice ate one of them, perhaps by accident, and that's how he got smart. So that's how that works. That's well explained to us. That's fine. We get that. That's not the case with Spider, and we're not really given any alternative explanation with Spider. But my understanding from Rat Kings in other media, I guess, like having come across the idea in other media, is that like that's kind of their thing, is that they can communicate telepathically.
All right, I wasn't aware of that.
No, and this is pure coincidence, just from like a kid's cartoon. I think I was watching Hilda on Netflix with my daughter, and there's a Rat King in that. And it's the same deal. The Rat King knows everybody's secrets, and it can talk to the human characters telepathically. So when that started happening in this book, I was like, yeah, sure. That's fine. That matches my experience of Rat Kings. That's what they do. Based literally just on this one
like
other.
A potential X-Men villain.
Oh yeah, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
Especially if the X-Men were also rats. But it was just a whole.
Yeah, because otherwise, I think it's quite a scary sort of picture. The notion of these 8 rats tied together and moving forward one rat at a time, literally as a spider. That's quite unsettling.
Yeah, I mean the name Spider is obviously chosen for a reason there. And you're right, it is. It's a gnarly image. Definitely feeds into the kind of Lovecraftian elements present in this story.
Yeah, so you don't want to let that image into your mind or think about it.
Yeah, and
so it's a literal.
And you get why, like, I mean, this is a concept that has come, I assume, from real life. You know, this isn't like a creation of some specific author that I'm aware of anyway. You know, like the idea, like if you imagine coming across something like this in real life, like a bunch of rats tied together by the tail, and they're all coming at you. They're all acting as one, because I'm sure that's what they end up having to do to survive. Like that would be creepy as hell, you know.
Yeah.
So I totally get why like legends and rumors and fairy tales about this specific thing exist. And I love the idea that he's making hay out of it here. I don't know. I think you're right. It's perhaps a bit much that the Rat King is like influencing the minds of everybody in the town, and the amount of power that it has is maybe feels a little bit overextended if it's not going to have a specific explanation. I would agree with that, I guess.
Yeah, full 1970s Magneto there.
But why not? You know, I mean, that's a great villain right there. So,
speaking of darkness, the dog pit sequence.
Yeah, like that's a kid's book, like
as well. Yeah, quite sort of barbarous. I don't know if this is actually a thing with dogs and rats, but obviously like dog pits with dog fighting.
Yeah, I think that terriers have definitely been used to catch rats. So I don't know how much is extrapolated on that, but that's definitely a thing historically. Like that's why some breeds of terriers are bred for size and stuff like that, as far as I understand it.
I mean, I suppose from the rat's perspective, when in what you say about like a terrier bred that catch and kill rats, when that's coming in, there is a sealed environment thing. It might not be a sort of a Fight Club type thing, but like when the terror and the fear are going, I guess that's how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of like what we imagine, you know, in the Colosseum of civilians being thrown to lions, like that's what's happening here, isn't it? You know, it's this rats are being thrown to dogs. It's the equivalent, you know, for entertainment. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I want to know how much of that is based in fact, frankly. But you know, from the point of view of this story, from the characters that we're following to find themselves in that situation, it's totally believable, and it's totally terrifying then as a result.
I felt the stuff on the attack on Jacko's gonads was like immoral and ethical writing, but I enjoyed the fucking hell out of it.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Well earned. And
Excuse my
you know,
language.
no, no, yeah, it's earned, as I say. Yeah, and like how Darktan's kind of worldview changes in this section. He has a near death experience, and then he is kind of faced with the. I mean, there's no other word for it than evil. He's faced with the evil of humanity in this section, like what humans think about rats. And there's all sorts of allegories, you could take from this. You could,
Yeah.
you could read this as an argument for veganism, potentially. You could read it as an argument for pacifism, for all sorts of things. But it's a really interesting, really brave, I think, idea, especially again to have to continually think about this as a kid's book, to put a rat in that position and to put a child in that position, reading the story from the rat's point of view, realizing for the first time how cruel and unforgiving the world can potentially be. If I mean that's your
Yeah.
Carnegie Medal right there, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
That's why I
Yeah.
say it's so transgressive.
Yes,
Like a
that's a really
really,
good. That's a really
yeah.
good word for it. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's that sequence. That's the award-winning sequence right there, as far as I'm concerned. It really, really
Very,
stuck with me.
very ballsy. Like it under a lesser writer, it just could have been cruel and tasteless. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
Real
yes,
courageous choices.
tonally, it's a really good point. Tonally, a very fine line to walk, I think, because it could become trite as a metaphor. It could become trite as a spectacle, as a sequence. It could become too gory. It could become too spectacular and not kind of character driven enough. But I think keeping it all from Darktan, or keeping a lot of it from Darktan's perspective, and how I think he's with Peaches at the time, isn't he? It's Darktan and Peaches together, and like she kind of notices a change come over him, and just give maybe even equipping a child to kind of recognize those changes in other people, to kind of recognize the wounds that adults have. I think that's a good life skill, possibly to try to impart.
Yeah, I felt the almost died sequence was quite unsettling. I did expect to see more death of rats throughout the book, but certainly here. And yeah, the sort of the vividness with which that section was read was written. And as well, going back to the dog ring, um, that it might just be so um, horrific, yet also does the sensationalist comedy thing, and the communications between rats and humans.
Yeah,
There's how is it I've put it in the synopsis? Quite deliberately a daring and unforgettable rescue, and it's
indeed.
this lovely sort of revolutionary kind of moment of the rats showing a visible example of fighting back
Oh yeah, big
and
big
nothing notice.
big cathartic moment in the story for sure. For those of you who aren't watching the video, Andy put his glasses on there, so you knew he was serious. He had a point to make. He made it well. But yeah, and you need that. A lot of the stories, the rats, kind of coming to grips with their lot in life and what it means to be a rat in a world that's controlled by humans, and they have their, that moment of catharsis where they get to fight back is well earned, and I think that's why it doesn't feel trite. Well, I mean, it's easy for me to say that. There's, as I said, tonally, Terry's kind of threading quite a thin line there, but he nails it, and he always nails it. So we know that he would. Um,
Um, Sorry.
I was just going to say about the kind of end of ham and pork as well, because that kind of
Yeah.
happens. So.
Do you know? I find myself trying to remember how Hammond Park died. I think I know now it might have come from injury sustained in the dog ring, but I really like that I am not entirely sure. because what there is there is an element of it. It wasn't a cruel, bitter, sensationalist death. It wasn't milked. It was just a shit thing that happened, and stuff like that does happen. Animals die, pets die, and it's sad.
Yeah, and I'm sure reading all this.
Haven't worked a good life.
Yeah, and I think the rat catchers recognized him as like the biggest, baddest rat amongst the talking rats, and that's probably all he ever wanted, really. In a funny way, even though it did lead to him having this kind of final showdown and ultimately to dying like that. That's probably I think that was okay for him. He died like a rat. That's what he wanted to do. I think. Um,
And he got his sensationalist escape before that, his big show moment.
yeah, exactly. So it's everything that you could possibly want for the old school rat who feels out of place in the new world. Kind of got to go out doing old school ratty things, and that's yeah, it's a nice ending for him.
Alan Kirkby legend.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, and the death of rats that you mentioned, I think it could have got a little bit. I was about to say cheesy. Rats, cheese, mousetraps. Anyone? No. Okay.
Viewers, I'm not going to mute PJ.
It's fair. It's well deserved. I actually can't remember what I was going to say. No. Just all that good stuff we've been talking about tonally, I guess, about it being a bit darker and a bit transgressive and everything. I think if we'd have had too much death of rats, I think that might have undermined it. The death of rats has generally been comic relief in death stories and in Susan's stories and stuff. So I think it would have been strange not to have the death of rats in the story, not to acknowledge the fact that the death of rats exists in this world. And the fact that he's kind of legend, that the bone rat exists and they know that you see the bone rat when you die. Them building their own kind of mythos and almost kind of their own legends around stuff like that kind of shows this emerging rat society, and it's kind of cool to actually to have the death of rats at the heart of that, and to have him turn up, a couple of times as well is nice. But I don't think it needs to be any more than that. I'm kind of glad it isn't.
More horror, more Spider, where he's just the stuff with Maurice primarily, and then to some extent with Dangerous Beings, where there's that sort of like a temptation of Dangerous Beings. But I felt, and I think you probably and most readers felt, that Dangerous Beings is bluffing all the way through that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, although I wouldn't necessarily discount the concept that Dangerous Beings is being genuinely tested. For all his intelligence, like he believes it, or it's basically stated outright to us that he believes the Mr. Bunsey book. Like he believed that was true. He believed that it was possible for humans and animals to kind of live in harmony. And the fact that it becomes extremely clear to him that it's not, like that's a huge knock to his worldview.
Crisis of faith in it.
I mean, yeah. So it's exactly. I love that phrase. I love the last temptation of Dangerous Beings. Like that's tremendous. So I certainly wouldn't underestimate the stakes of all that stuff. I think he gets quite a nice journey. I know what you mean. I know when you were chatting earlier saying that like it does get lost in the shuffle a little bit. There's a lot going on in this section, as I always say. But yeah, and he is kind of absent for a significant part of it. So I get how that maybe feels like it falls to the wayside a little bit, but I mean, you've got a character called Dangerous Beans. There has to be a payoff. It's too cool a character name, he's too cool a guy.
Spider just does work as a phenomenal foe for Maurice in particular. This sort of psychological wrestling going on between them. There's a sequence, it's about 3 pages long, which is just Maurice battling Spider. Actually, there's about 3 or 4 scenes that are the two of them that are about 3 pages long.
Yeah, that's right.
They outstay the rank of it all.
No, not at all. Like this kind of running battle almost between them, and Morris trying to fight his instinct just to run away. Basically, I think is really cool. I'm really interested in general to me actually how focused we are on the rat characters in this book. I mean, Morris is the title character. Keith is the
Yeah,
lead human
let's
character.
talk about Morris a bit. What do you feel about him generally?
Yeah, I think he's very much kind of an outlet for Terry's slightly cynical side. Usually we see that come out in, veterinary characters like that, a little bit maybe in Granny Weatherwax, but I think it's distilled. It's a more concentrated version of that in Morris. And I
You know,
think,
I was actually thinking this at some point reading the book. Morris is our veterinary or Vimes of this world.
yeah, I think he's even more cynical than Vimes potentially. I don't think he has the kind of underlying decency that Vimes has, at least not until
Yeah,
right at the end.
yeah. I mean, the revelation of the fate of additives is not
Yeah, yeah,
particularly shocking, but
yeah,
absolutely makes sense.
yeah, and that's a really good
That's a
character
good
reveal.
reality driver in it.
Oh, big time, yeah, yeah. But I also like how that information is withheld and deployed at exactly the right time where we kind of go, well, look, everything we know about Morris leads us to believe that he would just leave. Like that's what he's telling us. Like that's what he says the whole way through, but he never does it. And then it's when we find out about additives, then we go, oh yeah, okay, that's why he doesn't do it because he's carrying that guilt or whatever. But I do think it's interesting that despite being the title character, and despite the fact that there are human characters ostensibly knocking around in the story somewhere as well, that we both seem to be really focused on the rats.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
funny that I think Morris is pretty much the lead character for the start of the book, and certainly as main cast all the way through. But yes, it does open up to the ensemble throughout as well.
Yeah, and you can almost see he's just having a blast writing these rats, and he just ends up writing them more and more and more. But considering what he wants to say, I mean, it's all for the good, considering where we're going to end up, with a rat king ostensibly as a villain with this kind of rat fighting dog pit set piece. We want to see all that stuff from the rats' perspectives as much as possible. Like that's where the stakes are. Like that's where the conflict is. That's where the drama is. So in a way, that makes this last section feel a bit weird to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and then we're going to talk about it. A good plan isn't one where someone wins. It's where nobody thinks they've lost. Morris and Dangerous Beans survive an encounter with death. The Rat Piper arrives and a high stakes duel with Keith. Bad Blintz and the clan talk peace laboriously. And then in red, Andy has written Transgressive Children's Literature, which I don't think is part of the synopsis, but I thought I should read it out anyway.
I just probably get that down because like, it does say so much. I want to at least come across as smart on his podcast.
Nailed it. You nailed it.
Uh, yeah, so really nice trick with death comes for Morris. Morris has 9 lives. Um, it gives one of them to Dangerous Beings. Not quite realism, really. We're going back into fantasy world, which is interesting structurally, actually.
Not quite realism in the story about the talking rats.
Uh,
Okay. Okay.
but yeah, a lovely sort of character beat for Morris. A real moment of just compassion. And it's interesting that I was just wondering if so we've seen Dangerous Beans and Morris paired together in the challenge against Spider. So in continuity, it's only right that they're paired together in facing death. But I wondered, was there something more thematically or subtextually in that?
Hmm.
I couldn't reach any answers when I thought about it.
No, I think at this stage in Discworld, death death has taken on a life of its own. Right? So I don't think always like the usual kind of thematic and subtextual things we would apply. necessarily apply in Discworld because Death is this actual well-established character in his own right. So I think that can kind of muddy the water sometimes, but it can lead to sort of some fun thematic kind of things as well, you know.
I'm not looking through this book again, but not right now. Maybe next month.
I
But
mean,
if I
he has it in
remember
his hat.
rightly, Death knows Morris by name. They've
Yeah.
done it before.
Now, to be fair, it has been established a lot from like the first appearance of Death
Yeah.
that he has a soft spot for cats. Like we know that, you know. So I kind of buy it, you know, especially since that goes all the way back to Mort at least. Like we know that Death has a soft spot for cats. So
And
I
Death
don't.
knows everybody's name too, but that there is a relationship from the back and forward of the numerous lives as well.
Yeah, so I don't have an issue with it at all. It feels very Discworld in a way that maybe some of the rest of the book doesn't. So I guess that's a potential criticism. But would it be weirder? It definitely would be weirder if all these characters ended up in these near-death situations and there was no death or there was no death of rats because that really would take us out of this world. We would be in standalone story territory at that point then, I think.
Yeah, when I look and play with my own rodents, I'm always acutely aware of how fragile they are, how vulnerable.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think if you're going to have a book with such a low body count of main rodent characters, I think it's excused to have multiple near-death experiences.
Yeah, and if that's going to happen in a Discworld book, then those characters then have to be there, and that's fine. I don't mind the idea so much of Morris giving a life away to dangerous beings, just because it obviously represents the culmination of his character arc. Even though it's a relatively well trodden character arc, in that you've got a character who professes that they're selfish at the start, ends up giving away something quite precious, one of their lives to another character who deserves it. And that, you know, it's not particularly complex storytelling, but it's satisfying, you know, and that mechanism, that story mechanism, I guess, exists already in the world. You know, we know that death comes and talks to people when they die. We know that cats have 9 lives. We know that death likes cats. So I'm fine with it, you know.
And this discworldliness is the perfect tonal bridge to from the moment the Piper shows up, it goes full traditional Discworld in terms of tone.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a little jarring. Not necessarily in a bad way because I feel like we have earned it because
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and I guess it's been foreshadowed for the whole book that this whole business is a scam. It's a Piper scam. I think that's literally what they call it. So inevitably, a real Piper has to emerge, and inevitably, because it's this world, that Piper will also be running a scam.
Yeah, I love the oh, that he's so different from the two rat catchers we've had. This sort of Lothario-like description of him. You know, he's wearing a well, I can't remember, but in my head he's wearing a hat and a matching suit, maybe all white, and he's just lazing out in the fountain. He's doing his beard. There's all these sort of Western motifs actually that I'm just realizing now that are set up for the duel.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, because
yeah, he's quite a standard figure, I think.
yeah, I part of me wishes, and I'll be interested to see because we will, or I certainly will, inevitably now have to go watch the movie that they made out of this.
Together.
Yes, we'll try and do it together for the podcast. I don't know if I can hold off watching it for the first time, but we'll see. I'll try. I'll do my best. But it works on the page because we set up the concept that the real pipers, real rat pipers exist, but on screen, I think it would be unbalanced if we only met this character for the first time this late in the third act. We don't even meet him at the start of the third act. We meet him at the start of the finale. I don't think I think that would be a tough proposition on screen. So I'd be curious to see how they handle it. I think you do get away with it in
I
the
mean,
book.
he doesn't make up a. I don't think he's actually an essential part of the plot. He is foreshadowed, um, but he comes in. I mean, we've already had the big resolution,
Yeah,
removal of Spider, and this is the second resolution, the rats and bad blinks. You could
yeah,
even conceivably write the Piper out.
yeah, and that's not generally a good sign. That if the story can survive without
Yeah,
without a
I mean, I
character.
think it's better to have him in. He's quite a fun character.
Yeah, and I think that's a good
Quite
point
pivotal
actually.
in Keith's arc. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's more of a denouement than it is a finale actually, perhaps. But I feel like just through the natural evolution of the story, like Keith and Maurice maybe ended up taking more of a backseat to the rats than might have been originally intended. And that has maybe slightly unbalanced the plotting of the third act because this isn't the finale. We're not as invested in this business as we were with.
I think I disagree. I think Morris is pretty active all the way through. I think Keith is maybe more of a passive character.
Yeah.
Much like Melissa, but he's more important than Melissa. He's not particularly proactive until this section where he becomes quite pivotal. But I think all the groundwork has been set for that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it works on the page. That's fine. I think it would be I'd be very interested to see how they handle it on screen, where I think the kind of audience expectations and story structure is slightly more rigid. Um, and if you can't set stuff up in a theoretical way, you know, if something doesn't appear on screen, then it doesn't exist. Whereas we can talk about the idea of pipers and the sort of this constant mild threat that a real piper might arrive. That'll be trickier, and I'm really interested to see if they keep the same ending because it gets us to something really, really Terry Pratchett-y, which
Well, we've
is
got
the
sorry.
negotiation. I was just gonna say it gets us to the point where the rats negotiate with the humans, and that's just like the most Terry Pratchett thing I've
Yeah,
ever
I
read.
was about to say pretty much the same thing. I wanted to throw in a segue to sardines and Mr. Clicky,
Yeah, yeah,
but the culmination of things with the Piper is pretty much a foreshadowing or very similar younger sibling to how things are resolved with bad blinks. I mean, they could totally trash the Piper. They could um, just ruin stuff for him, but they
yeah.
choose the ending where everybody wins. Um,
Or as your quote says, nobody thinks they've lost.
yeah, yeah, and it's actually more than a nice sort of diplomatic, very Darktan-esque kind of thing. It actually sets up the talks with Bad Blintz, and it shows the rats as having that. Keith is uh, shows Keith as having that muscle
Yeah, yeah.
that they can take to open up negotiations. Where it's revealed that the rats have muscle other than just being vermin.
Yeah, and that's the payoff I guess we've ultimately been building towards. So yeah, it is. I mean, ultimately, again, who am I to question the great Sir Terry Pratchett? Uh, as I said, the payoff we've been building towards, and it feels satisfying and it feels right. But yeah, that the whole set piece with the Piper, like you said before, I don't know. You know, that there's maybe a different way to get there. Like I think we should definitely arrive where we arrive by the ending, but whether we need to go through the Piper is a question mark. But it would if he didn't, if the Piper was edited out, would we be sitting here doing a podcast about this book, going, how come there was no Piper? How come there was a book
Right,
about the Pied Piper and there was no Piper? You know?
right, and the trad fable has been tapped on so much by this stage of the book that yeah, it would be weird if there was a gap there.
Yeah, maybe there just needed to be a hint of him somewhere else. Maybe just needed seated a bit more strongly, a bit more kind of I guess, on screen, for want of a better word. Maybe just a little bit more kind of presence, physical presence, rather than just conceptual presence earlier in the story. I don't know. Very, again, small, nitpicky note, as all our notes are when it comes to Sir Cherry.
There was a bit about the chat with the town council where so we've got first we've got we forgot to mention Sergeant Doppelpunkt, which
Oh yeah.
is German for colon, I think,
Oh, and yeah.
and
That's
Corporal
good.
Knopf.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Guardsmen are guardsmen, or watchmen are watchmen, aren't they? Wherever you go. Yeah. Um,
In the discussion with the town council, a lot of the pitch is given by a character, forget who. My thinking was that it should have really been given to Darktan Keith. Um, when it wasn't a lot of the pitch of how the rats and the humans are going to live side by side. Oh, I know we're not doing favorite quotes yet, but
I mean, we're nearly
a
there. If you want
favorite
to, let's just
fantastic line.
let's just jump into it because we're pretty much there.
The sergeant pulled sardines out of his pocket. The rat was eating a biscuit, but he raised his hat politely. Isn't that a bit unhygienic? Said the mayor. No, Gov, he's washed his hands, said Sardines.
Yeah, all about those perspectives.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff. Oh man, just while we're there, and the whole negotiations thing, I find it slightly hard to believe that like kids, if there are kids reading these books, that they're super into this kind of discussion of politics between rats and humans at the end. But maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. But I did have to laugh at the stipulation that both languages be on the street signs. Clause 193, since if that's something that humans and rats can agree about in a fantasy world that we here in Northern Ireland can't still agree about. We can't have both languages on our street signs without people kicking up a fuss. So I did have to laugh about that.
I may as well bring out one of my bright spots of the book, of
Yeah,
which there are
we're there.
numerous.
Yeah, that's where we're at. Let's do it.
It's a little scene between Darktown and the mayor where they just get so bored of the laborious negotiations they go and have a chat in the side room, and it's I mean I guess there is a veterinarian vibes kind of element, but actually it's the inverse of that. It's
Yeah,
much friendlier.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it's just two like minds, really. I mean, obviously the mayor is a lot more experienced than Darktan, but there's this kind of he he manages a sort of a mutual respect.
yeah, for sure.
Some of it,
Yeah.
yeah, I
I,
love that scene.
I mean, we almost made it through a whole episode without mention of the political situation in Northern Ireland. But I think, when you read accounts of like the peace process here and stuff, and you get that from some of the first-hand accounts that the people involved in those negotiations, even though they were from radically different backgrounds and held radically different viewpoints, would often, find a mutual respect for each other. And one of my favorite pubs in Belfast is the John Hewitt, and if you go in there, there's photographs of David Irvine, who was a loyalist politician, and Gerry Adams, Republican politician, smoking pipes together,
Nice.
which is quite nice. So
John
yeah,
Hewitt is a great pub if you ever come to Belfast. Well, hit us up, obviously, but
yeah,
check out the John Hewitt.
yeah, my office is next door, so definitely you can find me in there. Uh, if you're doing bright spots, I want to do one as well. Then, so I love the chant. I love the little kind of boot camp style chant that the rats have.
Oh yeah, I was going
So
to earmark that so
yeah,
we
I've
could
got it.
read it. I don't suppose you do.
I do. Yeah. Here we go. We fight dogs and we chase cats. Ain't no trap can stop the rats. Got no plague and got no fleas. We drink poison, we steal cheese. Mess with us and you will see. We'll put poison in your tea. Here we fight and here we'll stay. We will never go away. I think the cheese line is the best. It peaked in the middle. But yeah, great stuff.
Fantastic, PJ. There's also another little bit. It's not really a scene. Um, but I was talking about sardines and the performative nature, and we get Bad Blintz turned into a tourist attraction.
Oh
That
yeah.
is such a sardines theme character. Like you couldn't really have that without sardines.
Oh yeah, that's his brainchild
Being
for
who
sure.
he was.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, lots to be. I'm glad there is so much to like about it. Really glad. I don't know what put me
And you know
off.
what feels like just to focus on that a bit, it feels
Yeah,
very
do.
real. Like there's a town somewhere in Europe that has rats coming out on clocks and hitting hammers on the hour or yeah.
Yeah, it feels totally plausible, which is says so much about how well observed everything that Terry writes is.
Do you know, PJ, we must do some sort of ranking episode at some point. And this is
Oh,
going a lot higher than I suspected when I was sort of starting out.
yeah, that'll
This
be.
is I got thinking of small gods when I was reading this, and
Mm.
I suspect I might put it high up the rankings.
Yeah, in terms of those standalone entries with big ideas and big characters, yeah, it's up there for sure. That'd be tricky for me, I think, because I would have to really fight against like a lot of my ingrained opinions about the series. Like there's books there that I've read, I don't even know how many times, going back 20 years. But now I've just read this for the first time and I really engage with it. I think it would be tricky for me to try to fit that into an existing hierarchy. Like I don't know if I have a conscious hierarchy, but I'm sure there's an unconscious hierarchy there in my head of all the books. But yes, I would absolutely agree with your sentiment that this comes in a lot higher than I was expecting. I don't really know what put me off reading it the first time around. I think maybe I mentioned before, maybe when we were doing the last hero that I had taken a break. I maybe hadn't read a little Discworld for a while, and then I think I came back with the Thief of Time. So this had come out, Last Hero had come out, which didn't interest me that much because I wasn't a big Cohen guy at the time. And this, I was like, oh, what? There's a book about a talking cat, or there's a new City Watch book. So Night Watch had also come out, which is what we're going to read next. So if I'm sitting, looking at the bookshelf in what year is this? 2001. With my paltry earnings, I worked on a juice bar at the time. My paltry earnings from working on a juice bar, I'm like, am I going to buy some book about a talking cat, or am I going to buy the next Sam Vimes City Watch book? And I
The
obviously bought
juice
my.
bar years, we would have. This is about the time we met over the internet.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So
Remember
I
you
think
got me the juice bar?
indeed, yeah, it's the juice bar is still there actually. If you're in Belfast and you're going to the John Hewitt, make sure you go across the road, across Royal Avenue to Castlecourt and get a juice. Uh, but yeah, I think I was probably in my haste to catch up with the City Watch books. I probably neglected this as a result and just kind of stayed off my radar, I suppose, because it's not connected to any of the other series. It stayed off my radar until the movie came out. And then obviously I didn't want to watch the movie until I read the book. And then I did the podcast, and here we are.
We'll be returning to watch in 2026, which is just around the corner.
Indeed.
Night Watch, um, which I know you're very excited about.
I'm trying not to overhype it, but I'm feeling massively. I'm super super excited. I definitely can say unequivocally that I have it. I have the in hard copy. I bought the hardcover when it came out. It got me kind of back into Discworld in a big way around that time. So I failed at overhyping it. I am currently overhyping it as we speak. If you're listening along with us and you haven't read it yet, you're in for a treat. If you have read it and you're looking for an excuse to revisit it, like I am, I hope you enjoy that process as much as I certainly will. And we'll get back here and we'll talk about that
I
in the new
I
year.
expect to bring my thrilling stories of decades of night shift work to that. Have you anything more you want to say on quotes or favorite scenes from Morris?
Well, after I did my brat marching song, that wasn't
I mean,
enough.
that's probably the peak, right?
It's hard to beat that. Yeah, the street sign thing made me giggle. I mentioned that.
I have a quote which I carefully messaged you as soon as I spotted it so that I could recall it now and wouldn't lose it.
Nice. Go
Um,
for it.
it's from Darktown on leadership.
Oh, yeah.
After you've learned to shout, you have to learn not to.
Ah, yeah. A very Carrie
Oh,
Pratchett quote.
gold wisdom.
Yeah. I like that you go for the slightly more optimistic ones. I noticed in my notes here that I've highlighted three quotes on a theme that from page 183 to page 193, so over a 10-page section. I think it's when they're kind of trying to grapple with the concept of spider. And this is from Darktan, I think. You saw them run. They ran and squeaked and forgot how to talk. Underneath were just rats. And then later on,
That's scary.
yeah, I can't control the dark inside, which is where all darkness is. Which is like, I know I highlight quotes like that all the time, but just like how at times Terry seems so pessimistic about humanity, about what we are as people, and how that just bleeds through, usually around that period, usually around the midpoint, in a book where all is lost. He's like, people are shit.
Well, thank you for joining us for this celebratory podcast.
But
You're
then,
like,
but
well, we have 31
yeah,
stay over with.
but then they always go on to prove us wrong, right? The people are shit in the middle of the book, and then they prove us wrong by the end of it, and that's what brings us back. That's what's at the heart, I think. Even though he knows that, like he knows that we're not, he knows how flawed we are, but he celebrates us anyway. Like he still finds joy and beauty and light in humanity and what it means to be a person, whether you're a human or a rat or a cat. Uh, yeah, I mean that's keep bang on about it every book, really, but that is the thing that has always kind of brought me back to Discworld and probably always will. Is that better? Is that a bit more uplifting for you? Is that all right?
Say again.
All right, what do you got? You want to plug some shit or what?
Right, plug time then.
Go for it.
Oh, well, actually, come and talk to us on YouTube and on Facebook. Maybe not on Facebook, actually, but on Blue Sky and YouTube. We're at Discworld GNU, which I probably find out the meaning to very soon.
Not as soon as you would like.
Certainly next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always love talking about stuff. PJ is makes his way around the Discworld Reddit. I pop in now and again. So yeah, we love talking and thank you for all our feedback so far. I'm gonna just be cheeky and pop in with my Patreon things because I know there's a few people who've signed up to help me pay my way in life because of this podcast.
Oh, that's nice.
So
The glasses are back on. That's how he's serious. The glasses are back on, people.
I'm going to go through all the names.
It's not a drill.
Small but loyal following. Fiona McKenzie, Sonia Andre, Richard Wang, Gerga Yemrick, Andrew Bolster, Donald Fallon, Alex C., Amanda Rodriguez, Shell, Dave Cromie, Matt Saunders, Andrew Gallagher, Alan Royal, Benjamin Stone, Arslan Hyder Ali, and particularly Ian Lawler, who goes hammers on the Zoom bill, which allows us to do this. And actually, literally has been paying all of it lately.
Oh, thanks, Ian. That's very
So
good.
thanks. Yeah, we'll get that. I get that sorted. Yeah. All right. Well, PJ, do you want to do a plug? Is there anything you've done lately that might be recommended to?
No, not really. Nah, been quiet, really. No, not really. Nothing that I haven't plugged before, certainly. But stay tuned. Hopefully next year we might have some things to talk about, which would be great. But no, for right now.
So you need to go to youtube.com/@AndrewLuke and check out Screen Cleaner. There's 5 episodes out already. There's a 6th one. Episode 5 has a piece by our very own PJ Hart talking about religion and law in Northern Ireland. And
Everybody's favorite topics.
It's very weird. It's very weird.
It is.
I know some of you have checked Screen Cleaner out, and I'm very glad because I put a lot of work into it. I think it's a very funny, well-researched show. I deserve maybe not a Carnegie Award for it, but some kind of medal.
I mean, it's not for kids. That's for sure.
Definitely not for kids.
Yeah, I definitely check it out. As Andy says, production value is pretty high. It's loads of fun. No, I mean, my segment's probably the worst produced, and I produced it, but I love all the graphics and stuff that you're getting in, and all the different guests and stuff. I think it's really fun. It's got great energy.
Thanks, PJ. The sound quality is a bit of a trial and error, sort of it keeps changing. But yeah, there's some great guests on, so some absolutely brilliant commentators, and yeah, a lot of subject matter.
So when does it go out? Tell the people when they need to tune in.
We are streaming live. It's pre-recorded, but there'll be previews on Wednesday night at 10 p.m. UK time. I think we've only another couple of episodes there before Christmas, when that first series is done. So this is your Discworld podcast preview. Screen Cleaner will be back in 2026. You heard it here first.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, and I guess we aren't gonna do a Christmas or New Year's Never Read Discworld this year. So or are we?
I think we have time.
Trying to do the maths. Yeah. Yeah, we'll put our heads together on that. I know we've certainly floated some ideas during the year, so stay tuned.
We'll see. It might well be a New Year's special.
Yeah.
But you will get, if you check back to our YouTube channel, you will get an introduction to the amazing Andrew and his educated gerbils.
Yes, do check that out. That's going to definitely be worthwhile. I do have a cat. I did try to get my cat involved. I went looking for him, but he's out on his adventures. Hopefully, not getting his brain overwritten by a rat king or whatever.
And listen, thank you to Ben and Elizabeth over at the Pratchett podcast and everybody who's talked to us over Twitter and shared our YouTube and Twitter. Oh God, no, it's called Blue Sky now, isn't it? And who's shared our work.
Yeah, particularly great to see the YouTube's comments coming in. So keep that going, guys. That's awesome.
Okay, be back next month-ish for more cool gear. We'll let you know on the socials.
Stay tuned. All right, thanks. So I can say I've now read some more Discworld. Not often I can say that on this podcast. So I'm stealing Andy's line.
We have read more Discworld.
Indeed. Until next time, thank you. Bye bye.